In 1862, President Abraham Lincoln greeted Harriet Beecher Stowe, addressing her as the little woman who wrote the book that started this great war. The war was the Civil War, and the book was Uncle Tom's Cabin, written by Stowe in 1852. This book, written in the midst of a burgeoning abolition movement, skyrocketed Stowe to fame as a prominent abolitionist and further divided the nation along pro-slavery and abolition lines. Up until this point, Stowe had been a housewife and educator, publishing writings on various topics as a means to support her family. But Uncle Tom's Cabin forever changed her reputation and positioned her as a historical figure to be remembered. Harriet Beecher was born on June 14, 1811, in Litchfield, Connecticut, to Lyman and Roxana Foote Beecher, the seventh of 9 children. The Beechers were a very religious white family, well known for being highly educated, devout Calvinists, and participants in the colonization and abolitionist movements. After her mother died, Stowe was raised and heavily influenced by her father and older sister Catherine. Lyman Beecher was a famous Calvinist preacher, promoting ideas of punishment for human sinfulness and lack of assured salvation. Stowe struggled with her father's beliefs, and after listening to one of his sermons, had a strong conversion experience at age 14. This moved Stowe away from her father's belief system to a faith based on love and forgiveness. Despite his daughter's deviation from him, Lyman recognized Stowe's intelligence and talents at a young age and encouraged her education and writing. This, along with the help of her older sister Catherine, a prominent educator, Stowe was afforded an excellent education and her writing talents were able to flourish. Stowe attended the Hartford Female Seminary in 1824 in Hartford, Connecticut, which was run by Catherine herself. The Hartford Female Seminary was an innovative school, encouraging women's education, especially in home economics. Stowe also studied composition, developing a love for poetry. Upon discovering her sister writing stories at the seminary, Catherine encouraged Stowe to write on more serious, suitable topics about religion and theology. After attending the seminary, the Beecher family moved to Cincinnati, Ohio. Living in Cincinnati, Ohio with their family, Stowe was exposed to the horrors of slavery firsthand as they bordered the slave state of Kentucky. Stowe heard firsthand accounts about the horrors of slavery from escaped slaves she met who crossed the border into Ohio. In Cincinnati, Catherine founded the Western Female Institute, where Stowe taught as well. During this time, Stowe began to write seriously, having her first published work appear in the Western Monthly magazine in 1833. With the encouragement of her sister, Stowe continued to write. In 1836, Stowe married the theologian Calvin Stowe and gave birth to twin daughters later that year. As their family continued to grow, Stowe continued to write. Stowe's early works included a short story collection about New England titled The Mayflower, published in 1843. After the death of one of her sons in 1849, Stowe's writing slowed down as she mourned his death. The next year, 1850, the Stowes moved to Maine, and Stowe began writing again. It was Stowe's next piece of work that elevated her to fame as a national icon and abolitionist. During this time, slavery was a widespread practice, but the abolition movement was gaining momentum as activists, such as William Lloyd Garrison, were beginning to actively oppose slavery. The passage of the Compromise of 1850, including the Fugitive Slave Act, was a crucial law, enhancing slavery and hindering abolition efforts. The Fugitive Slave Act required free states to return runaway slaves to their Southern owners. While this was a pivotal moment in the institution of slavery, it was pivotal for Stowe as well. This law outraged and motivated Stowe to do something for the abolitionist movement. It was shortly after the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act that Stowe received a letter from her sister-in-law in Boston explaining the suffering experienced by escaped slaves. In this letter, Stowe's sister-in-law wrote, "If I could use a pen as you can, I would write something that will make this whole nation feel what an accursed thing slavery is." Later on, while attending church, Stowe had a vision of a slave being brutally beaten by his master, inspiring the story of Uncle Tom's Cabin. That same day, Stowe rushed home to write down the story. Having run out of paper, she turned to a brown paper bag to finish writing on. Stowe says that they were God's words she was transcribing. She wrote the entire story on this day, and it was first published in an anti-slavery newspaper in 1851. Then, in 1852, Uncle Tom's Cabin was published as a book, immediately becoming a bestseller, selling 300,000 copies in its first year of publication. Uncle Tom's Cabin combines several people's stories, portraying relations between blacks and whites, the North and the South, and men and women. It depicts the story of a slave, Tom, as he is sold from slave owner to slave owner in the South, enduring the wrath of various cruel masters until his final master beats him to death. It also follows the story of two escaped slaves as they travel north in the search of freedom. As well, Uncle Tom's Cabin describes Northern attitudes about slavery and abolition through the characters of a Northern senator and his wife, who are decidedly unproductive and racist despite their supposed commitment to abolition. Stowe's religious beliefs about benevolence and forgiveness are prominent throughout the book, as Tom, even in the midst of torture, forgives his slave masters and remains pious and faithful. Uncle Tom's Cabin, meant to be an anti-slavery text and source of commentary on the Fugitive Slave Act, caused a national uproar. Slaveholders were infuriated at the depiction of themselves, claiming it was a false representation of the practice of slavery. Stowe was also criticized for using many stereotypes, but other readers finally had their eyes opened to the inhumane treatment of slaves and were compelled to support abolition, which was Stowe's intention. One of the most powerful aspects of Stowe's novel is Stowe's deliberate intent on depicting the North as aiding in the institution of slavery. One of the most powerful aspects of Stowe's novel is Stowe's deliberate intent on depicting the North as aiding in the institution of slavery. According to Lorinda Cahoon, Stowe's refusal to let the North remain blameless deepened her portrayal of slavery and encouraged her abolitionist readers to act. The text frequently addresses readers and asks if they would be willing to break laws in order to enforce a greater moral right. Another key aspect of the novel addressed by Stowe is the function of laws upholding slavery and the distinction between political laws and moral laws. Stowe is clearly concerned with moral laws, as she supports breaking the law, mainly the Fugitive Slave Act, when it comes to ending slavery. Uncle Tom's Cabin clearly echoes Stowe's sentiments about the need for human morality and immediate abolition. Selling 300,000 copies the year after it was published, Uncle Tom's Cabin greatly influenced a wide array of readers and evoked much sympathy for slaves. Deborah Newman Ham claims, "Perhaps no other work of fiction did so much to alter the thinking of an entire population with respect to the major question of the day." Stowe deserves much credit for creating a political climate that supported emancipation. While it faced much criticism, there is no denying the effect the novel had in garnering support for the abolition movement. It is because of the polarizing effect that the novel had on the country that Lincoln credited Stowe with starting the Civil War. In 1853, Stowe published her next book, The Key to Uncle Tom's Cabin, as an answer to her critics concerning the legitimacy of portrayals in Uncle Tom's Cabin. The Key to Uncle Tom's Cabin is a compilation of newspaper articles, sources, and accounts from former slaves about the practices of slavery. This book, while not nearly as popular as Uncle Tom's Cabin, was still successful for the fact that it supported Uncle Tom's Cabin and aided in promoting the abolition movement. Following these two novels, Stowe went on to write several more books. However, she never again would reach the success she did with Uncle Tom's Cabin. Her later books included Sunny Memories of Foreign Lands, Dread, A Tale of the Dismal Swamp, The Minister's Wooing, The Pearl of Orr's Island, and Old Town Folks. After Uncle Tom's Cabin, Stowe's writing focused more on feminist issues, life in New England, and traveling. Stowe wrote a variety of travel commentaries based on her travels to Europe. Like Uncle Tom's Cabin, Stowe's religious ideas about God and love resonate throughout all her works. While Stowe proved herself an abolitionist with the anti-slavery text Uncle Tom's Cabin, she also proves to be a scholar on regional life and woman's life with her other writings. Her books about New England have helped future readers to understand the structure and livelihood of 19th century New England. Stowe's writings about women's lives proved her to be a scholar in feminist writing as well. Her strong female characters with rational voices and opinions demonstrated the power of females in a time when they were highly marginalized. From anti-slavery texts to travel narratives to feminist literature, Stowe has written across a number of genres and topics, establishing herself as a prominent contributor to American literature. Uncle Tom's Cabin played a large role during the height of the abolitionist movement, influencing many people to act and support the cause. It will forever be remembered as a valuable tool in the abolitionist movement because of its international appeal and popularity, which drove readers to act. The novel continues to be read, studied, and debated today because of its commentary on race, gender, region, and religion. Because of this novel, Harriet Beecher Stowe cemented herself in history as a prominent abolitionist who deserves to continue to be recognized and acclaimed thanks in large part to her revolutionary book, Uncle Tom's Cabin.